Alright, so in the last videos we went through the process of importing and what each plugin object does. In this one we're going to go through the user config settings before we hit installation. Now again, I'm going to be focusing on the ColFX installer rather than the DimmerFX, just because any options contained in DimmerFX are also in ColFX and some more. So we're going to right click or edit click on our installer plugin. And inside we will see that we have two sets of user config settings. We have installation settings and we have color engine settings. So let's look at what each of these do. In installation settings, we're starting with our overwrite presets. These are going to be the color presets that are being referenced by the effect and are being overwritten as we pick new colors. So essentially what happens is, in this case, the color effect will be referencing presets, color presets 201 and 202. As we pick new colors, they will be overriding, for example, preset 1 onto preset 201, so that the effect continues to reference the same preset, but the information in that preset is updated. If we want to do more than two presets, we can add 203. We just put a comma in and put our extra number in, or we could do 4 rows or however many we want to. In these cases, the effect will still only be referencing the first two presets, but if you have like color bumps or chases that you want to be having reference more than two color presets, you can add those rows in just by adding them into this field. Below that, we're going to get into some starting points for storing information. Now, for any of these, this is different because the entire point is for it to overwrite a preset. However, for anything else, it's going to look ahead to see if there is something already in the way where it's about to try to store something, and if there is, it's going to move on to the next available point so it doesn't overwrite existing information. So it's going to do that for views, images, macros, layout, sequence. These numbers just allow you to tell the plugin where to start looking. So if you don't want it to start looking for one and store at the earliest available spot, you can have it start looking from macro 2001 in this case, so it stays out of the way of everything else that you've got. Below we have the page name. This will be the name of the executor page where all the buttons store to, the effect slot where it's going to try to store the effect name, what it's going to name the effect. This one's important because all of the macros and sequence lines will be referencing the effect by its name and by its exact name. No wildcards will be involved. However, that's not true. Wildcard will be involved on the page, but as far as the name of that executor, there will not be a wildcard. However, I bring this up because for me, when I'm running any of my effects for me on a fader, end with _FX so that I can have a macro grab all those and bring them to 0 when I'm at the end of a song instead of having to grab them all manually. Anything like that you have in mind, go ahead and add them in here. You can name this whatever you want. Just know that all the modifications will be happening to the effect named this. So if you have another effect named that, you might have problems. And you can edit that later from the user config section of the engine plugin. So if you realize something later that you want to change, that is all adjustable after the fact. The last part of the installation settings is the background color. This will be the background color of the generated layout and all of its elements. So as you can see on this installation of it, we have this dark red background on the layout and on each individual macro. This is something you can edit over here. If I wanted to bring this to 0, I can do that, and then you would go into setup, grab all of these, and change the background color of them to match. So you can set it to whatever you want after the fact as well. This option just gives you a way to set it earlier. I changed it to that dark red only after I started adding a black macro in, so that's kind of was the inspiring factor of that. So anyways, that's all of our installation settings. We have our color engine settings. All of these are going to change the values that are stored into the queue stacks that are created to run our effect. So for example, our widths queue stack will have values of 10, 25, and 50 to assign to the width of the effect. If I want to add a queue that is a width value of 100, which is valid past groups of 2, as we'll get into later, we can add that here, so that if you want to have the same installation settings every time, if you're jumping to other people's show files a lot instead of carrying your own, you can change that here and then again, export the plugin, blah, 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 with all your settings. We can do that with widths, blocks, rates, and groups, just like that. Just add a comma, add your value. Phase is just a little bit different because each phase object has both a value and a name that we will be taking care of. So the value is going to be the phase, for example. Value 360 means that it will be setting the effect to a phase of 360 through 0. Note we're not going 0 through 360, just so that positive values will correspond to a house left to house right movement on the rig, so that we don't have to jump into negative numbers for that. However, let's say we want to make a new one. We can just copy this line, and let's say I want to do minus 360. Negative numbers are still valid. They will just move you from house right to house left. So I will change the name to minus 1x, and if you don't have a particular name in mind, you can just leave this blank, and that is totally valid, and that's what I've done on 90 and 180. But this just gives you the opportunity to give a unique name to specific phase options that you use. Like, for example, 0, instead of it being 0, I said sync, because 0 through 0 is everything in sync at the same rate. So just gives you the option to have a unique name for each phase option. The very last user config section, actually, I will move this up here after this video, sorry. But the group number will actually be this is where it's going to store a group used for reference by the effect. So as you are updating which groups are or are not included in the color or dimmer effect, it will be storing them or removing them from a group. This group will be referenced by name. So once it exists, you can move it to wherever. However, before it exists, when the installation has just happened basically, and there is no group yet, when it does not find a group matching that name, this is the first place it's going to try to use to store a new group. If it can't use there, it'll move on. However, once the group's been created, again, it'll be referencing by name, so you can move it after that point to wherever. And it won't try to use this spot again until that has been deleted or renamed. So that's it for the user config section. And in the next video, we're going to go into the actual installation process.